Today I'm very excited to have as my guest Jim Enderle. Jim Enderle is a veteran of the Navy. He is a war hero. He is an author of a book telling about his story. He's done TED Talks to this subject area. I first met Jim, I think it was 2019, 2020, around the time of the pandemic, before the pandemic, maybe it was 2018, I'm not sure exactly. I asked to be on your radio show, Jim. Do you remember that? And was working on behalf of Connecticut Storytelling Center and trying to get the word out about storytelling and the importance of that. And your story is so compelling, Jim. So welcome. Thank you for being on my show today. So glad that you're here.
It's great to be here, Kate. Thank you for inviting me.
Oh, it was so welcome. We've been trying to do this, I think, for about 7 years now, right? So
yeah.
So we finally have done it. So yay, kudos to us, right? So should we just jump right into your book, because it's such a compelling story, and the title of the book is Fight, Flight, or Freeze. You have to slow down when you say it. It's a little bit of a tongue twister, and it's a love story. And you're saying it's a love story. Is it a typical love story between a man and a woman, or what? How is the love story?
It's interesting, and I really love to hear this, but people who have read the book, if they ever get a chance to ask me a question, they say, which love story are you talking about? And they know that there's a love story between my wife Cindy and I.
Of course.
Because it details our journey, like through a deployment, and her struggles as a military wife as I was deployed.
It's a hardship, and I don't think we give enough credit to the people who are left at home and left behind, and how hard that is, raising kids, the family, keeping things together. Where's daddy? Where's daddy? Oh, daddy will be back, right? Calming the home front, keeping it steady, right? Yeah.
I know for her, when I found out I was leaving, that I was going to be gone for a year, and Cindy kept on saying, a year, 12 months. 365 days, a year. She kept saying like it was hard for her to absorb.
Just to wrap her head around it, just to think, wow, that's a long time. Yeah.
Yeah, my previous deployments had been 6 months.
Okay, so you've been deployed 3 times, if I remember things correctly. Your first deployment was to the Mediterranean. You finished boot camp and then went off to the Mediterranean. That's not a bad gig, right? Except for being away from your family, right?
We were fortunate in 1998 that there were no major conflicts going on there. And actually what we did, I was real proud of it. We did more humanitarian work.
Oh, that's nice.
Than anything. There was an earthquake in Turkey that year. They had a huge container ship that was on fire so it's like I sort of thought there's more to being in the military than just deploying to a combat zone.
Oh, that's interesting, yeah. Well, you're a hospital corpsman, so you're always caring about people, the physical component of it, mental health component of it as well, or just physical primarily?
I did a lot of both. I think if a person is there, we're not trained psychologists.
Right.
But
you're
young
compassionate.
people, I was 35 years old, so I was a little bit older and had some life experience. And I was working with a lot of young men and women who were 18 years old, 25 years old. You know, they were younger, and then they would almost automatically sometimes just come up. I was a little bit more like an older brother or a father figure to a lot of them.
I'm sure.
So some of the struggles of deployment, the loneliness, the Dear John letters, the different things. I always believe that I should be available at any moment.
Oh, wow.
No matter what. That if someone was troubled enough at 1:30 in the morning to wake me up, then I thought it was worth getting up and investigating what was wrong.
That's tough. Well, I'm sure you saved a lot of lives, just keeping them so that they could get up the next day, but also physically. So you probably saw some trauma, different accidents that happened and things that you had to help heal.
Yeah, we had one instance on the ship where what's known as a rogue wave hit, while a lot of these bosun's mates were outside the skin of the ship repairing something, and then this wave hit and just smashed like 6 or 7 of them.
Oh boy!
And they were all 7 of them had to be taken off of the ship, and that was that was one of the worst things on the ship that I'd experienced.
Well, the wave just came crashing in, and they had to be taken away. They just got so.
Yeah, you have a 5-foot wave, a 5-foot wave, a 30-foot wave, and the 30-foot wave just smashed them against the side of the ship. And then they were a couple of them were unconscious, and they were just hanging on ropes. So we had to pull them in and render care right away. We had doctors who had deployed with us, and on my ship we had Marines on board. So they had as much as we could muster together. We worked on it. But that was the first major trauma that I'd witnessed in my life.
Oh, I'm sure that was pretty traumatic for you as well, right? So the real story, I think the story worth telling is the one that we've talked about before, where you set up the stage. You set up the story. Go ahead with that. Go ahead.
I really, when I wrote the book originally, I began writing the book after my family and I were separated.
Right.
And the book was really a bitter account of being sent off to war without there being a real understanding of what the consequences were. Mm-hmm. But while I was deployed to Iraq, I was there for a year. And one of the days that we were giving immunizations, one of the detainees that were there, now we say detainees because there were 15,000, and a lot of them were held without official charges. And in order to go along with the laws of war and the Geneva Conventions, we had to make accommodations in some ways, and that even meant paying families. So a lot of these men hadn't done anything. They were just rounded up, and they happened to be in an area where they were arrested.
The wrong place at the wrong time.
And yes, so you don't know that I've heard reports off and on that the man who wound up being in charge of ISIS, the al-Baghdadi, was there when I was there. I don't know that was true or not, but some of the men were very dangerous, and then there were others that just were there that were held without charges. While I was giving, they suspected a tuberculosis outbreak, and when I went we had to provide the shots for tuberculosis.
Sure.
And one of the men that was standing in the line held up an envelope, and it was unusual because these men stood in straight lines. Mm-hmm. They didn't have this particular compound was supposed extremists, so they didn't want to make eye contact. They didn't want to be immunized. They didn't want to be immunized. They didn't want anything to do with American soldiers. Mm-hmm. So for a man to be out of the line and making sure he was visible to me seemed really unusual. And
making eye contact, wanting to get your attention.
Yeah.
So then what happened?
Well, he when he got my eye contact, he was sort of smiling, and then he reached into a waistband and he pulled up an envelope. And he held up an envelope, and after I looked at it for a couple of minutes, I thought, well, it looks like an envelope. That's my family's envelope. And then I felt like this rush, like I turned red, like I couldn't see colors. I just was looking at him like I took it also personally. Like here I'd been deployed in a war zone, and it hadn't occurred to me that there were people that meant to do me harm. That was the first moment where I thought, oh my God, these people want to do something to hurt my family. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And
so how did he get that information? How did he get your contact information for your family members?
What they found is that there were, on the base, because it was a huge army base.
Mm-hmm. You said 15,000.
That's the number of people who were detained.
Okay, so even bigger than that.
Yeah, and then they would hire third-party nationals to do things. Some would be barbers, some would have restaurants. They would just to provide services to clean the porta potties, just to provide these different things. And I know they would vet these men, but some of the third-party nationals were sympathetic with the insurgent cause.
Of course.
And they were going in after a mail call and pulling out addresses of American soldiers.
There you go.
And in that sense, it would give an American soldier who's deployed just too many things to think about. Instead of just thinking, I'm just going to focus on my job, I'm going to be here for a year, and when I'm done, I go home and everything is great. I can cut the grass, I can go out with my family, I can And all of a sudden, it's just like my family is in danger.
Right.
And I thought, I'm here for a year. And
how far
I can't
into
go home.
this was that? Was it shortly after you arrived that he had got? Oh,
this
wow.
was within 2 months.
2 months, wow. So you had 10 more months to go. And did you let your family back home know that this was a fear or a concern?
I thought all I could do is say things like in a cryptic way, like, I know we live in a neighborhood where it's pretty safe, but make sure that you lock all the doors, okay? And I thought if I said much more, all they can do is worry.
Right. Well, they're worried anyway, and whatever you would say is just going to be adding, more levels of worry on top of that. And
before we left, I told Cindy, I'm going to tell our children that I'm going away for this time. And I got my daughter in the car, and we were driving along. And I sort of thought, I said, let's go for ice cream. And just to show how kids are so perceptive, we got in the car, we drove about 15 feet, and she said, you're going to die there, aren't you, Dad?
Oh, my goodness.
And I just stopped for a second, and I said, okay, here's, and I tried to find some way to explain it, but there weren't words for it. I said, here's the thing. Many people who go there are not immediately in danger.
Right.
But whenever we were watching the news, the only thing you saw was explosions and car bombings and roadside bombs and things like that.
Right.
And then in the meantime, my older son is he was trying to understand what a year meant.
Right.
So in his mind, he kept on saying a year. What does that mean? That means you're leaving now in summer. You're going to be gone. He was like trying to process all this information. Like, okay, so you're leaving in February, right? And you're going to miss Christmas and birthdays and as he named all these things, it was heartbreaking to me because you just say, I'm gone for a year. That's all I want to think about. And all of a sudden, it's like, okay, we miss the fireworks, we miss the birthdays, we miss anniversaries, everything that there is to miss, you miss. And even in a 6-month deployment, you can come back and your children are a little taller.
Right.
Their voices
changed.
are different.
Yep.
You go home and the house is rearranged.
Yep.
And your spouse has learned how to do things in a way that works.
I understand that.
For that family. And so you almost feel like an outsider at first. That you're thinking, okay, I'm just going to try to settle back in again. But hearing those things before I left, I thought, I can't do anything. And then this carried over to when I came back. I thought, I don't want to do anything that will destroy their innocence.
Of course. How old were they at the time, Jim?
13. My son was 13. My daughter was 11.
Okay.
And so that they were old enough to watch the news, which Cindy didn't watch the news anymore after that. She said, she said they absorb all this, so I'm not going to watch the news anymore.
Well, it's protection. You need to understand boundaries and what's an appropriate boundary and how to make yourself so that you can continue to function. And if giving yourself a break from knowing the nitty-gritty and everything that's going on, power to her to know what her strengths and limits are. So, yeah, I think this story, though, gets even better when you talk about the detainee and him holding up your information, and then you actually had more of a conversation with him, right?
I had I went to a dark place. 3 weeks later, the compound where he was accidentally struck by insurgent rockets because they would rocket and mortar our base on a pretty regular basis. And on this one particular day, that compound was hit. And it was in the morning, and I was in a bunker somewhere, and someone said they hit compound, and I don't remember the number now, but they said they hit compound something.
And you knew he was in that compound.
And the first thing I thought was, I'm going to kill him.
Oh, boy.
And I'm going to confront. I didn't think confront. I'll say confront now, but at that time I thought, this is my chance.
Yep.
And I jumped into the back of a personnel carrier, and the whole way there, I was processing through all this information because I wonder if that's not where the split with veterans comes, where they struggle with the return, because I had two identities. I had an identity in the military,
sure,
that I am responsible for the man or woman to my left and to my right. And I've been sent here to perform a mission, and I've signed on the dotted line that says I'll do what I'm ordered as long as it's a lawful order. And on the other hand, I was raised by people who wanted me to be a priest, and I thought often about what I could tell my children about service. Like aside from, I didn't want them to go, wow, Dad's a war hero. I didn't want them to think Dad's going to go out and take out all these bad guys, because I knew better than to think that this is like a movie.
Right.
And I thought there were more important lessons for them to learn. So that's what I tried to focus on. So
Which
as
is
I
tough
was,
because they're almost polar opposites in a way, right?
Yeah.
You're trying to do both simultaneously, and then keep centered and grounded in your own thoughts and beliefs, and living your day, doing what you've been hired to do, what you've been deployed to do.
yeah.
So you heard that
I went to the compound, I jumped off, the fence was gone, and they had a lot of these men who were detainees that were just walking around. But they weren't, some of them were in a daze because it hit right in the middle. A number of them were killed and a lot of them were injured. And some of them were just walking up and like pulling like a child on the medics, the Army medics and the Navy corpsmen. Please help me. Please help me. And then they were trying to point back to the compound and where these men were.
because there's a language barrier, of course, where they can't communicate and say, hey, this just happened. So they have to use nonverbals to get their idea across. But at this point, they're asking for help, wanting you to help them.
They were asking for help, which what we believed this whole time, like you can be conditioned to believe. I sort of thought the minute they get out, they're going to they'll kill the first American they see.
So you're still fear-based. But part of you was feeling angry. Part of you was looking for this guy with the letter, the identification information of your family, and part of you was just scared, right? Yeah. Okay.
I found him. I turned a corner and I found him, and he was lying on the ground, and he was one of the people that was badly wounded. And he looked at me, and I looked at him, and I thought, any chance he has to survive, which was slim and none, depends on me. And I thought I had a tourniquet, and I had a pistol. And my question to myself, and part of the reason that the book is Fight, Flight, or Freeze is everyone knows about fight or flight.
Right. You froze.
And I froze.
You froze.
I stopped, and I thought, what do I do? Like, which person am I going to decide to be? And I didn't think I would encounter a moment like that in my life, and I stopped. And we looked at each other, and he looked at me, and he began to say something that sounded like a prayer. And I didn't know what else to do, and I began to pray. So both of us were standing 10 feet apart. I could hear him breathing. And at the end, he just put his hand out. And that was it. He just put his hand out, and then at that point, he died. I looked at his hand. I looked at him. I looked at his hand again, and I still had no idea. Besides praying, I had no idea what to do.
Right.
Then when he died, not too long after that, my interpreter came along because he was trying to collect everybody. He walked up to me, and then he walked up to this detainee because he was Iraqi. And he knelt down like slowly, like I sort of thought it's like it was a genuflection. And he reached in, and like he went and he looked at his clothes, and he pulled this paper out that had a poem on it. And it was in Arabic, but he read it in English. And I listened to him say that if I told the sea what I felt for you, it would have left its shores, its shells, its fish, and followed me. And then I heard that, and then I looked back at this detainee, which I'd identified as a militant before that. I said, he's a militant, he's an enemy. And all of a sudden I was looking, and when the whole day was over, I felt sick. I was sick. And at the end of the day, I asked my my interpreter, I said, is it possible to learn more about this
him.
man? After that man died, there was another, it turned out there was a father and son who were detained together. And I looked up and I saw that man, and I was sitting there thinking, why couldn't I do anything? I couldn't move.
You were frozen, right? Shock.
And then I stopped and I saw this, I didn't know it was a father, but I saw a man trying to pick up another detainee, and it was so hot that morning. It was the only morning that it rained that night. So it was just like a steam bath coming up.
Yeah.
And this man was just pouring sweat as the uniforms were just soaked right through the overalls that they had. And then he fell down, and then he was like he was looking around like he had no idea what to do. And then I walked up behind this man who was like now he was just kneeling and he was just looking. He was like shaking him, and I thought it's a boy. We don't have children here. I'm thinking, but it turned out he was 17 years old, and he was shaking him, like, come on, I'm talking to you, listen to me.
Like, don't die, right?
In Arabic. Yeah, and like I was standing behind him, and then I looked, and I grabbed a tourniquet, and I began to think, okay, here's what I can do.
Trying to save his life again.
I decided, I thought maybe I can do something.
Right.
I don't know.
Right.
And then I just saw the boy's hand it was like leaning on his dad, and it just dropped.
Yep.
And then the father still had no idea who was there. And then I looked, and all of a sudden I thought, I thought he just died. And this father just let out a scream.
I'm sure.
I thought it was of a parent. I thought only a parent would have that kind of a scream. And I don't know why I did it, but I reached out and I put my hand on his shoulder.
The father's shoulder.
The father's shoulder. And the father had no idea who's behind him at this point. He was in his own world.
Right.
And he put his hand over mine and he squeezed.
Oh.
And we stood there for a moment, and I thought, I apologized because I thought of his mother, and I thought, his mother is somewhere. She's either something is clicking in her mind somewhere, because I thought, I don't know why I was thinking mothers know, and I'm sorry for her,
of course, because
somewhere she knows. And but then later on that day, I asked the interpreter, I said, can I find out more about these men? Can you tell me who they were?
First of all, the guy with the information, and then the second one that you saw passed away with the father.
With the father.
Okay.
And then he told me, well, that was his father. So there were other people that were consoling the man. And I didn't think he would do anything, but like the last day of my deployment, he gave me this envelope, and it had all these letters. The young man had 4 younger sisters. One of them had been killed in a battle between militants and army forces going through where they lived in Mahmoudiyah, just south of Baghdad. And then now the mother has 2 of her 5 children. But there were...
She's lost 3 of her children. She had 5 and lost 3. Is that what you're saying?
She lost 2. She lost her daughter, and then now, like, her son had passed away.
Okay.
That was her only son, and she had 3 other daughters.
Okay.
But in some of the correspondence that they would have going back and forth, the father was a baker, and the mother was a librarian, who I thought it was ironic, but she was pursuing a doctorate degree in American literature.
Oh.
So so a lot of her letters, she was saying, well, Mark Twain said this or this, and this sort of makes me think of, she was like this thoughtful person. And then I thought, she does a lot of what I do. Then I'm thinking, I want to teach my children not just about war. I want to teach them about meaningful things that that you can think, okay, you can take this and carry this forward like in a positive way.
Life and lessons and values and words to live by, basically, right? Wow. I think it humanizes war. I don't think we even think about the story that you just told, the instances that you just described, and what it takes out of you as a person. And did you feel trauma then as a result of all of this?
I don't know what I didn't process it for years. I began to just think, the other man who had the envelope, he described becoming a refugee. They left the town of Heat after there was an attack on American Marines there, and they fled. They were thinking, and the way they described it, they said Americans don't do anything in small measure. Like if something happens on a scale of 1 to 10, they go on a scale of 20 to 10. So they thought something big is coming. And they left, and his mother and sister were killed stepping on a mine. And then his father, when they reached their destination, his father and uncle were killed. And then he was arrested. So he was saying, like a lot of times I think that he said, I think people will automatically make assumptions, but the most dangerous weapon they owned was a slingshot and a fishing pole to go hunting. They didn't have weapons. They weren't militants. They weren't anything. So some of the things people can, like I've tried to investigate that, and that's why I thought a second book was necessary, to investigate, like to go in a more granular detail on these letters, because there's like an overlap where I felt like I was learning from these people who were homeless. They were like on the bottom rungs of society. They were refugees. They
escaped someplace else to be where they were, and then became detained or deployed or whatever.
Yeah.
And then they get caught up into this, and
the lessons for me, who came from, compared to them, like a much more privileged place, that I'm thinking, okay, I get done here, I go back home.
Right.
I thought I have a house, I'm going to go back and cut the grass. We'll spend days, we'll picnic, we can go to restaurants if we want, we can. But there were, in my letters, in their letters, I began to see what their definitions of words were. I know the woman, because she was a librarian, and she would say, what is freedom? Like she would have like sort of an essay on it, like what really is freedom?
Esoteric kinds of conversations or discussions going on.
And she was asking her husband, and she said, I know you're a baker, but I want to explain this to you, because she said Americans think they have all kinds of choices, but they only have the choices that are made available by the powerful people. So she said, in that sense, they're really not as free as they think they are. And she said, now here we've had everything taken away from us, and in some ways I feel like everything is available now. Exactly. So it was like, in some things in the letters, it almost turns life completely upside down, where I'm thinking, oh, I'm the powerful guy. I'm the one with all the guns. I'm the one with all the technology behind me. And I'm thinking, and I'm learning lessons from these people who they had nothing. Their biggest decision was what they were going to put in their backpacks when they fled their homes. And their house was gone. Their identity was gone. Their church was gone. Education for the young girls in the family stopped. Then the mother had to leave, because a mother and 3 daughters in a house weren't safe, because you have to have a man there, and militants wanted to move into the house, and the militants actually wanted her to be the wife of the militant. Oh, jeez. And she was just going, I can't. Right. Me and my daughters are leaving. I'm sorry. And then they began a long trek up to
escape
up to Turkey, where they could find a way out.
Well, Jim, we don't have much time left, and it's just been a compelling story that you've told, and I really appreciate you sharing your story. I just think it's one that gives us insight into what war is really like. And I don't like war. I had 7 brothers, and 3 of them served, so I understand that. It would be nice if we could live in a world where we didn't have to live like that and be like that. So, but you have a sequel that you're working on. You said you have an agent, and we don't know the name of, you haven't found a title for your next book.
No, but I wanted to, I wanted it to be something that would sort of say the story of what the book is about.
Well, I can't wait to read it. Yeah, well, I can't wait for you to get it done so I can read it. And I did read some of the manuscripts of your first book. I remember doing that, and that was very insightful and delightful, even though it is a very difficult subject. So I appreciate you sharing all of this. It's just such a heartfelt conversation that I think we all need to be aware of. So any last minute pieces of advice for anybody, the next generation, people who are thinking about enlisting and being deployed?
I think now about how lucky I am that I survived the aftermath. That surviving the aftermath was probably more difficult. But I think Archimedes said once, there's a lot of times I'll hear sayings, he said that if I have a place to stand and a long enough lever, I can move the earth. And I'll think about these letters that I found, and I thought, I think you have to be a little lucky too, because those letters could have just gone into a burn pit and never have been read. And somehow I thought, what a privilege it is for me to have these letters, these personal accounts from these young girls and these parents back and forth. What a privilege it is for me. So I felt an obligation to tell that story in a way that someone would go, wow, they're not all enemies.
At the end of the day, they're people just like us, right? And they want the same things we want. They want food, they want shelter, they want to enjoy their children, and they want to see their children grow old and not bury them, right? That's what they really want. In
this world, it's so easy to look at something and everything is like a viral moment now. Everything is determined almost immediately because so much information is available. But I would hope that someone would think, you know what, I'm going to take an extra second and look at this person, and maybe it's not quite what I think. And I think we need to have that kind of thinking.
I agree. Well, it's a great story, and I thank you for telling it, and I hope that it's not traumatic for you to remember all of this again, but certainly a story.
It's healing for me now.
It's healing for you. Good. I'm glad to hear that. It's good. Good. So I want to thank my sponsor, Supercharge, for helping us to host this show today. And Jim, thank you again for being my guest. It's just such a pleasure to be with you.
Thank you, Kate. Thanks again for inviting me.
My pleasure.